Well, I'm delighted to be here. This has just been a wonderful day, and if I can keep you awake for a few minutes, but I want you to know I've been used to preaching to sleeping people in my journey. But I certainly have been coming here for several years. I've been enriched by this experience and have been able to translate what we have discussed by Movement with Life into the church community. I guess I need to say to you that when we talk about the African American community, it's important to understand the role of the church historically and existentially in the lives of African American people. We, if you go through it, when I say church, I guess I want to talk about spirituality. Not so much church as the organization, but the dynamic of spirituality, which is an important component of African American people in this country and even since the slave trade. It's what I would argue that the thing that made African Americans who were shipped from Africa survive was spirituality. And the spirituality was not captured in simply the whether or not they were associated with formal religion, but the kind of spirituality that transcends organized religion. So that when the slave was taken from Africa, he or she was put on the ship and had nothing left. And the only thing that they had left was whatever spirituality that was the result of having come through the Middle Passage. They still held on to the spirituality. The ones who abandoned spirituality killed themselves on the way here. But the ones who survived were able to hold on to a survival spirituality. Consequently, when the slave landed here in different places, the Caribbean and Jamestown, 1619 and so forth, when they disembarked, they had a tribal spirituality that had come from Africa, and they were handed a manipulated American Christology that was designed to keep them docile and passive. So they wanted to keep the slave contained, so they gave them a prescriptive religion that was interpreted in a way that made them docile. But the spirituality alive in their transition was so alive that they reinterpreted the Christianity into their own. So the original American religion is the religion of the slave. All the other religion came from somewhere else in the world. But the slave created his own theology, a theology that defied the context in which he lived. So he was a slave, but yet he had a defiance of context. So the slave, though he had shackles and though he was beaten, he had a spirituality that was defying that context. So in the great music of the slave in the black church, he would say, no shoes on his feet, no clothes on his back. He says, I got shoes. All God's children got shoes. And when I get to heaven, I'm going to put on my shoes. No clothes on my back. I got a robe. You got a robe. All God's children got a robe. And when we get to heaven, we're going to shout all over heaven. It's a defiant theology, one that does not allow the context to determine value or station or hope. Hope is not abandoned by the theology of the slave who defied it. And that's the only way you could survive. That's the only way you could survive slavery, was to have an alive spirituality that defied social context. An alive spirituality that caused you to rise above it and still function and pass that on. And so as a result, the church, the African American church, became very important in the evolution of African American people. It is no mistake, no coincidence that the civil rights movement in America was birthed out of the church, out of that defiant theology. Everybody else saying you're nothing, but your sense of God says you are more than that. that you are somebody. Your sense of God is saying you have value. You are, in spite of the culture saying you have no value, there has this defiant theology that says, yes, you have value. And I don't think that African Americans could have survived unless they had this sense of defiance, because the structure was so designed to rip him of everything, clothes and culture and family and name and language, but yet he survived. Survived to get through Jim Crow and all of the experiences that African American people got through, and end up leading the march for liberation, even before Martin King, during the hangings, the lynchings times at the Niagara movement, the Niagara Fall. But Martin Luther King, that whole civil rights movement, birthed in the church. The church is what has caused the African American community to survive and be vibrant. And I would argue to you today that if we are going to help overcome obesity and the various forms of bad health that have affected African American communities, it's a ready partnership out there waiting to be tapped. The church, the black church, is a ready partnership. The faith community is a ready partner for the science community to overcome the handicaps of obesity, diabetes, and all of the mobility diseases that affect our lives. The church is available. And so I would invite you, because I contend that the highest form of intelligence is faith. There are some things that faith understands that no faith doesn't understand. Faith is the highest form of intelligence. You know, I'm a theologian, so I'm not a scientist, so I have to, I know where I am. I know I'm in this scientific room. But, so I say all that to tell you that there is a partnership available to the hospital and the science community, the doctors, that is undertapped. And that the churches need to be bought into it. I am the chairman of the Conference of National Black Churches, which is 9 historically black denominations with 33,000 congregations across America. If we could mobilize the churches to take on this issue of health disparity, because I do not believe that the solution is simply on institutions getting better. I believe that the people who are affected have to take on the desire to be better themselves. No matter how good a doctor you are, you can't do it for people. They got to want to be a partner with you in doing it. No matter how good your intentions are, no matter how much you think of it, the people must be bought into the solution. And if for you to be effective as a physician, you have got to get the people to partner with you. Good doctors win people into their scope of influence. Good doctors. Good doctors make people partners with them in administering their medicine. I heard one here today talk about getting the people to take on, to adopt to it. So it's important, therefore, that we see the church as a tool. I'm fortunate to say that Verona and other members of the staff and team have begun to take it to the church. I was happy to have Dr. Jones come to CNBC on 2 occasions to share her insights. And this December, we have a whole segment on health that's going to be presented to all of the heads of the denominations, because I contend that we have to educate the clergy to understand the alignment between health concerns and theological concerns. I'm not just trying to get my people to get wings. I want them to get knees if they need knees. So the church has to be not just by and after a while. It's got to be engaging people to raise the quality of people's lives. That's when the church is its best, not when it's trying to solicit persons to heaven. The church is at its best when it is improving the quality of life, when it is transforming the hell that people go through every day and bringing glimpses of paradise where they live. That's when the church is the best. And so it is important for me to understand that we encourage the churches. And so many of our churches today are taking it on. Vanessa Steele, who's a member of Grace in New York, my church, she started with this. We started out with HIV. When HIV first came on in our communities, in the black community, there was this bad Bible that came with it. Bad Bible. Before the science could educate, the bad Bible took over. And so it was a plague from God. It was a plague against homosexuals. And so the church backed away from it. The church left it. But Vanessa, she helped us, and we led opening up the door. And so that has continued to be. So today, churches are engaged in all kinds of activities trying to, in our church in New York, where I serve, we have taken it on in every way we know. We have this 5K run that is over on the ways. We have a health moment. I've encouraged pastors across the country to do this, and you can help them. We have about 25 physicians who are members of Grace in New York, and they have what they call a doctor's ministry. So every second Sunday, I have created a segment right in the center of the service, because you know the most powerful moment in the black church is Sunday morning between 11 and 2. So when I give them that real estate, that's the best real estate in the church. And so right in the middle of our service, every second Sunday, they do a health moment, using the slides and so forth, and sharing with people some disease, educating some disease. We've done this for maybe 4 years now. Harvard did a study on it, and we were able to show where the people, health information increased, and there were some instances where the information saved lives because people got the information. That's just one way to do it. One of the things we've done, I've seen happen in church, you've seen this in the film, where the church took out when I went to Grace, I've been in Grace 42 years, and when I went there, it was hard for me. Hazella, she heads our health and wholeness ministry. We have a whole ministry on stroke victims. She had a serious stroke. She was once an opera singer, had a serious stroke, and used her recovery to create a Stroke of Hope ministry that now has the church involved in addressing people who have had strokes. So we built 400 units of housing. So we have housing for stroke victims where we go in and Hosella is headed that. But it's very important for the church to see itself in that light. And so one of the things I was saying when I came, used to be plenty of fried chicken and good food from our past. And I was a connoisseur of that, a historical connoisseur of sorts. And it was, but with our ministries came along, next thing I knew, all the fried chicken, we don't fry chicken no more. We don't have no more pork in the greens. It's a dull situation right now. But you know, you have to change. You have to change because as you get more information, you can't live in the past. And the church is one place you have to be very careful. It's so committed to the past that sometimes it's paralyzed for the future. Sometimes the church is so committed to the past. You see, the whole authority of the biblical text and the authority of the tradition is so profound that it can be captured and not be liberated to address the relevant issues that the people in the parish have. So it's important that we make the modifications and we make the changes and that we invite the medical community. And I encourage the doctors here and the clinical people here to find in your communities cooperative partners who will help. You will help them to make the quality, save the lives of our community. We know that the disparity and bias, to use Dr. Jones' word, racism, to call it what it is, racism is something that African Americans, it is baggage that we get up every morning with. If you're an African American, you get up in the morning, before you get on your clothes, you have the baggage of racism, or you want to call it bias, whatever you want to call it. You have that baggage. And whatever you do the rest of the day, you got to do it with that baggage held on you. And if you see an African American succeed, he or she has done it overcoming despite the baggage. That's not true for the white community. That's not true in the white America. A white person achieves without the baggage of, and the baggage is everywhere. It's in education. You can't get into the school. Public schools are, in minority communities, are low grade. They're suffering. If you look at economics, getting a mortgage, or when the recession came, the majority of black people lost their wealth because their wealth was attached to their homes, and their homes were depleted by the mortgage situation. So you carry all kind of baggage. The baggage of criminal justice system. The number of black men who are going to end up in jail. Baggage. You got to get up with that in the morning, that your son has a good chance, 50% chance of going to jail, spending time in the penitentiary. Baggage. Or social, the prison, the education, the economics, all of them, and then health. Health. When a black person walks in the room, into the hospital, value judgments are made by him. A black person, a white person comes in the hospital room, the white person has automatically intrinsic higher value than the black person. And the black person does not have insurance opportunities. I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but overall, that is the state that we're in. And I challenge us to use the churches, because the church has authority in the lives of African American people. It's a gateway where which this good news that you have can be deposited. The church is a vehicle ready. Now, you may have to go through some of the gatekeepers. I'll have to give you a little coaching on that on the side. But you got to find your way into those institutions, because they can make our communities so much better. So the church has to be confronted, and people who are people of faith, whether they're Christians or Jews or Muslims or whatever, people of faith have to understand the obligation that the church has to make the world better. There's a little text in this, little scripture in the New Testament that says, this father, it's in Luke, this father has a son, and his son has some kind of disease. It's a disease that takes him over. It's undescribed in the biblical text. All it says is he turns on himself, he destroys himself, and he jumps in the fire, and he tries to do himself harm. And so the father goes to the church, and the church is so hung up on being the church that they don't take him seriously. The man goes to the disciples because they've been with Jesus, and so they figure if Jesus is a healer, then they ought to be a healer too. But then when they go to Jesus with this man, this son goes with his father, they don't do anything for him. I guess they ask questions like, are you a member here? Have you been baptized? Do you tithe? Who's your mama? Who's your daddy? And the father says, I don't know. That's not why I came here. I came here because my boy is sick. And then he leaves the disciples. And he goes out and he stumbles up on Jesus on his own. Stumbles up on him. You know, that's so encouraging to me. That means that the church is not the only place you can meet Jesus. Because there's some people in the church who are Jesus blockers. They get in the way of Jesus. But the scripture says that he bumped up to Jesus on his own. Jesus had just come down off the mountain. And he said, here's the indictment that the church has to live with, and you all can help the church get over this. I took my son to your disciples, and they could not heal him. And Jesus says, only place I know in the Bible where Jesus went to cussing. Now, you don't think he said, this is what he said. He said, oh, how long do I have to be with you before you understand what my ministry is about? Oh, now the reason why you don't know that's cussing is because it's been sanitized by 2,000 years of translation. But Jesus says, oh, you diverse generation, how long do I have to be with you before you understand what my ministry is all about? And the truth is that the man had a healing expectation of the disciples that they did not have of themselves. And they did not take on the priorities that Jesus had. Jesus' priority was people. And then finally, they had low faith. And faith is when faith is anemic, production cannot happen. And so I want to challenge us who are here, whatever your faith community will be, that we cannot just come to a conference like this and take in all this information. It is poor stewardship to take in what we've heard and keep it to ourselves. We must find ways to get what we are feeling and hearing and seeing, to get it distributed to the masses. Because it could be very well that you and I may be held accountable for having information that we did not distribute to those who need it most. Thank you for your time.
Hallelujah. Amen. Amen. So are you taking questions, Reverend? Does anybody have questions?
Reverend, how are you? Thank you. Thank you so much for that lecture.
On Sunday morning, it would be a sermon.
I have a question. How do you navigate the waters of people losing faith in the health system, as well as losing faith in religion? Because there's a lot of, in Queens, where I was raised, they're opening churches in every corner, taking the patient, people's money, and then disappearing.
Well,
so they're losing faith in both. How do you bring that back?
Yeah. Well, I think that there is a proliferation of churches because they're easy to start. But in terms of them being validated by years in service, as the population becomes more intelligent, the population becomes more selective. And consequently, you can't, one thing about being democracy in America is that you're free to do what you want to do. If you want to start a church, you can start a church. And it's not like you can start a church much easier than you can start a hospital or a medical practice, because you got criteria you have to meet. You don't have to have much criteria to start a church. You can just start a church, hang up a blunt, and you have a few people go on and call it, name it, and move forward. So that's an inherent challenge. That won't go away. But churches that have good intentions and understand the importance of service to people, who exist not for to serve the pastor, but to serve the community, those churches will be validated. And believe me, I do not believe that there are obstacles to health care, but I do not believe that there is an abandoning of health care. I think in the churches where I've served, there is an awakening, a greater consciousness, and it's an opportunity. Whatever the fallout has been, there's an opportunity to restore confidence in the medical professions. There's an opportunity, and that's what I'm pushing, the opportunity. Yes.
Pastor, I wanted you to address the MOCA ministry at Grace, because my daughter is a freshman in college at Wheaton College, and I don't know if you all are familiar with what happened over Halloween with the blackface incident. there at Wheaton that has really caused a great problem, a great outrage. And my daughter immediately reached back to the deacon that she's been assigned to by Grace. And she has been very prayerful and very strong in her faith about that because of her upbringing at Grace.
Yeah. Well, we have, right now we have 89 college students in colleges across the country, which we assign families to, and we buy their books for the 4 years they're in school, and we stay in relationship with them, and they end up coming back. We must have 7 or 8 doctors who've come through MOCA, and they're now at different places. So yes, MOCA is a very important.
Reverend, I wanted to thank you for your sermon just then. And, I'm particularly grateful because I recently started, I think the first of its kind, a campaign to educate people of color to be empowered in their healthcare settings. So we started out addressing implicit bias and seeing, okay, now how can we address implicit bias in the healthcare encounter from the patient's point of view? And so what we started was the Ask for Your Life campaign. And we are promoting the Ask for Your Life campaign mainly through churches. And this was, we thought, well, this is because the African American community is built so strongly around faith community. We figured, and I just want to find out if you agree with this, that if we are promoting the workshops in which we empower people to ask for their life, and ask stands for A, ask questions until you understand the answers, we're talking about in the healthcare setting. Speak up if something's not right, and know your body, your medications, your test results. So, and there's a whole workshop built around that with interactions. And we are promoting the churches to hold these workshops.
Wonderful.
And so I'm self-promoting right now, so that I figure you can help me get this out there better. And I'm just wondering, this is a new idea, and Dr. White encouraged me to do this. I started this after reading his book, Seeing Patients. I'm a retired OBGYN. And my focus was educating patients about patient safety, and then I learned about disparities, which I did not know about as a clinician. I did not know that 4 times or 5 times as many black women died during or after childbirth as you know, more black women were dying than white women. I didn't know about that. A lot of doctors don't know. They don't know about disparities. You all know because you're part of this caucus, but this is not well known, and I basically have given up on the work that Dr. White can continue to try to educate the doctors, but we decided we wanted the patients to know.
Wonderful.
So I wonder if you believe, and if other people here believe that that is a way to address bias by helping the patients become more aware and be empowered to overcome
I absolutely believe that.
Okay.
Some years ago, I wrote a book called The Power of the Pew. I believe that the key to successful ministry and to successful health is to inform the pew. The pew has the power to change. And so that's what you're going. You're going down that road to get the pew, organizing the pew in the churches to get information. Yes, I agree with that. Yes.
It's a pleasure meeting you, and you have stimulated me to, I'm charged to go back and even do more.
Well, you know, I saw that movie. You was already charged. I'm sorry.
But I wanted to say, because I'm part of the church. I'm
Yes.
a product of the church. I'm a minister as well. And I found when I first came into church, I came from the street into the church. I got salvation, but they wanted to sit me down. You know, I came into the atmosphere of just sit here and hear me preach. And I already knew there was more to life than just sitting down. So I came in an activated person, and they tried to kill me.
Calm you down.
And I found in the church, I was with the Chicken Society too, you know, the fried chicken and all of that. And they preached everything with sin, 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 sin. So I happened to start going through the Bible myself. And I found this scripture that said, why should we die before our time? That's what got me here. I said this at one of the meetings in Chicago. And I got tired of going to funerals. All the people that I was among, were dying off. And they would preach, the Lord took them and it was just their time. But that scripture was telling me a biscuit took them. Too much butter took that brother. All that tea, that sweet tea, and them candy yams, and them hammer hawks, took that sister. So I began to vocalize. I guess I became a radical in the church because they needed a revival.
Yeah.
And the revival was put them biscuits down, get up and move, and get back to the life, because he said, I came that you may have life and have it more abundantly.
Thank you.
So I would definitely be in touch
Thank
with
you
you,
so much.
Pastor.
God bless you. Mary?
I don't know that I can follow that. So I just wanted you to comment on your thoughts about the importance of patients and physicians sharing their spirituality.
Yes.
I think it's, I feel like there's this big societal pressure that we not talk about it. And I find in my own practice, and I don't see that many, I have a small clinical practice now, but I still operate. And when I see my patient in pre-op holding, I always say, I said my prayers driving into the hospital today, and I know that we're going to be okay. And it creates a window of opportunity for them to either respond to me in some kind of spiritually inclined way, right? Or they don't have to say anything. One, I feel better because I've made an affirmation, that I know where the healing's coming from. Okay, that's one. And it gives them a chance to make a connection with me in a way that it's really difficult to do, like in, I don't know, in just regular medical practice, I find. Maybe that's my shortcoming. I should find some other ways to do it. But I think that's just so important, because when that moment comes, then I feel good, they feel good. Because, there's one thing you learn in medicine, and that's that stuff happens, okay?
Yes,
Shit happens,
That's
okay?
right.
And, right?
That's right.
You never know, right? It's not up, bad things can happen. And so I'm wondering about how we create a culture or an environment where we promote more of those spiritual connections in that conversation, which I think is so important.
Well,
So your thoughts on
what
that?
was so wonderful, what you hit such a wonderful, on Tuesday this week, I visited a doctor at the hospital. And he came in, he's a Jewish gentleman, and he came in, and he knew who I was, and he started talking about his faith and his spirituality. And it was so moving to me. And Matthew, he kept on going so long, he said, you're supposed to be talking to me, I'm talking to you. But it was such a warm, and it was comforting to me, because I don't want a doctor who don't believe in God. Matter of fact, I understand scientists don't believe in God, many of them are atheists, but I need a spiritual connection, because my body is sacred. I mean, once sometimes you can get so caught up in the pathology and the biology and the science that you don't realize that the body is a spiritual, it's a temple. And many people feel that way about their bodies. So the person who's going to deal with my body, I want them to have some sense of spirituality. I know the medical profession doesn't encourage that, but I do know more and more. I remember when I was on the Central Committee of the World Council of Churches, we did a conference in the Soviet Union called Faith and Wholeness. That was the beginning of the dialogue in the World Council of Churches between the faith community and the science community. Now, since that time, we've come a long ways to shake hands and be partners in healing and health. That's where I think we got to go. I think the medical community, they ain't got to become Bible toters, but they got to have a sense of respect for spirituality. Yeah. And if we can get spirituality And we have a sense of respect for their competencies. I have a high regard for science and competence. I see it as a gift from God. And so that's what I would say to that. Yes.
Dr. Richardson, it's so good to see you here and hear what you have to say. Barbara Headley,
Yes.
senior pastor at Zion Community Baptist Church in Massachusetts, adjunct professor at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, served 38 years as a physical therapist. I'd say ditto to everything you said about, and also served on this steering committee many years ago, not that many, but some years ago. Ditto about everything you said about the historical connection of the African American church, and that it's been central historically to our communities. And if you want to reach and change the life, the quality of life, historically it's been there. I spent the past 3 years, particularly taking on another pastorate, and learning that that's a history and that's an understanding of our history that is lodged in our generation. There are millennials and there are Gen X's who don't get with that. That's your history kind of thing. And an attempt for us, the African American church, to still think that when things are going to be moved and shaped and reformed in the black community, that we are no longer the center player. A lot of our younger people are building their own alliances, their own collaborative movements, Black Lives Matters and a whole bunch of other things that really diss the church in our history. And how do we get in conversation? I would love to lay back on the romanticism about the black church and, we're the ones, we started the civil rights movement, but it was collaborative, and we need to get history with that. That was collaborative as well. But how do we not say, come to us, we know how to do this, we need to go to them.
Yes, you're right.
And we need to understand we're not the only game on the street anymore. That is a hard thing for us to really swallow, for those of us who have prided ourselves to say, it happens here, come to us, we got the people. Our younger generation, because they've been exposed to a greater diversity, are building their own lines, and we need to know how to come to them. A few weeks ago, I participated in a webinar by a sister out of a church in Houston about black millennials in the church. And I couldn't even ask questions because I was so shocked about their perspective on preachers, the church, the whole thing. You're not my pastor just because you think you that, the whole thing. And that we have to reframe our understanding in this present age for this present generation and help them to understand the history, because we talked about being ahistorical here. But how would you say the church, you talked about coming to the church, it's a good source of resources to reach out, but we got to come out and reach out to other people, including mosques and people who are not Christian.
Yeah, I agree with you too. Let me say this about that. I think the key is to get the millennial preacher leaders to be involved in our churches. In other words, I'm searching for young people on my staff, because I have surrendered that I can't get through the millennials. I can't, but I can make a door open so that a young preacher who is a millennial, who speaks their language, the bridge, the fact is that they're not gonna listen to no 68-year-old man. That's the deal. So I need to get somebody who can take it to them that they're gonna receive. I have millennials in the church. Matter of fact, one of the leading Black Lives millennials, Tamika Mallory, who was one of the organizers of the Million People. She's a member of our church. She's always keeping me up to date. I'm looking at stuff online that I ain't never looked at. But what I'm trying to say is that the church has got to. I'm not speaking in a sense that the church doesn't need to be improved and be constantly changing and adjusting. We got our own challenges. But the truth of the matter is, the church is located in every place black people are in this country. And if we can use that, we ain't gonna get 100%, but let me say this other thing I wanna say. There's nobody else who has the real estate that the church has. We're still the biggest game in the black community. We got our challenges, but ain't nobody out there to replace us. And the other thing I wanna say is, there's a pendulum, and it swings to the right, it swings to the left. It's going off leaving the church now, but believe me, it's coming back. spirituality is inherent in our humanity. We have a hunger. We need spirituality. And does not get satisfied by legalism, doesn't get satisfied by what's in style and trends. Ultimately, there is innate in each of us a spiritual need, a need for spiritual grounding, and we go back to it. And so we go through these phases, we go through these changes. My mama, when I was growing up, teenager, would have thought that I didn't know nothing about God. She thought my generation was done. So I mean, it's that's what. Yes.
Reverend Richardson, I want to thank you for your message and for your inspiration. But I have a question, more advice. As a African American female surgeon physician, taking care of patients who are predominantly working class, and I don't know what the political term would be, underclass, unemployed. As I'm recommending treatments to patients, a lot of times I get, oh, well, honey, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pray on it. Or I don't trust, no, I can't do that surgery. We're just going to pray. And I'll share with them, I believe in faith. I believe in God, just as you do. I believe God has the power to do everything. And I'll say, well, have you ever thought about maybe this is how God is answering that? And God put me here to do this. Oh, well, I'm still going to pray on that. And so as a leader, as a faith leader, maybe you could share how else we can help people see that sometimes their reliance on faith, we're a part of the faith that they want to ascribe to, and how to help them bridge their beliefs.
I'm absolutely on track with you, and you're on track to say to her what you're saying. You offered your own personal spirituality. You offered that God may be working. I guess I simply would tell you that this story was told where a man was, flood came, and he was on a roof. Went up to the roof to try to get over the flood with the water, but the water kept coming up. And the people sent a boat to get him, and he said, no, I'm trusting God. I'm a trusting God. And then water got a little higher, and they sent another boat. And he said, no, leave me alone. I'm trusting God. So the water got all the way up on the roof, and he was going to stand up, and they sent a helicopter, dropped the helicopter. They said, come on, you got to go. You're going to drown. He said, no, I'm trusting God. And so he died. When he got to heaven, he said, Lord, I served you all my life. You said you would take care of me. He said, I sent 2 boats and a helicopter. So, I mean, at some point, people have to give God flexibility
There we go.
on how he's going to answer.
There we go. I like that answer.